For the past 2 decades, the status of women in economics has refused to improve. While the proportion of women in STEM is going up and up, the gender gap in economics has stayed stubbornly wide. This is especially confusing, seeing as 150 years ago, economics was leading the way in women's educational emancipation. In fact, in this building in 1871, Professor of Political Economy John Eliot Cairns was holding the first ever co-educational class at any university anywhere in the UK. Just 7 years later, the University of London then became the first university in the UK to allow women to get degrees. And amongst the dozens of women that enrolled, a few of the economics students stood out. Eliza Armer first came to the UCL campus for lectures in 1871, studying political economy, jurisprudence and Roman law. In 1877, her professors called her papers very decidedly superior to those of any other candidate, and later that year she received the Joseph Hume Scholarship for Jurisprudence. In 1875, she started unofficially practicing law with a fellow UCL student, Mary Richardson, in chambers they set up together. She became the first woman in Britain to have a law degree in 1888, but unfortunately her practice still couldn't become official. It was another 31 years before a government act meant women could finally be called to the bar, but by now Armer was 71. During that 31 years, she became prominent in Liberal Party circles and through this had significant impact on public policy, such as when she became the Senior Lady Assistant Commissioner to the Royal Commission on Labour in 1892. Another winner of the Joseph Hume Scholarship is Clara Collett. Born in North London to a radical family, Collett spent time with the Marx family during her childhood. She got her master's at UCL in 1888. In 1886, she was brought on to the London Survey, led by Charles Booth and working with Beatrice Webb, who would go on to help found the London School of Economics. Collett moved to the East End to take on her task of documenting women's work, placing her at the exact time and place of the horrific Jack the Ripper attacks. In June 1890, on UCL campus, Collett became a founding member of the exclusive Economics Club, bringing together leading economists such as Marshall and Keynes to debate their work at issues of the day. In 1891, Collett published her paper, Women's Work in Leeds, in the very first volume of the Economics Journal. She became chief investigator on the Board of Trade in 1893, influencing government and working with politicians such as Winston Churchill. She also was involved with the Royal Commission on Labour alongside Eliza Armer and served on the councils of both the Royal Statistical Society and Royal Economic Society. Lastly, Ada Heather Bigg came to UCL in 1875. She went on to win the Joseph Hume Scholarship in 1881 and better still in 1891 achieved a Jevons studentship to study social and economic conditions in London. Much of her work focused on women's employment, writing papers such as Women and the Glove Trade and Women's Contribution to Family Income. In her will, Heather Bigg left funds for a prize to be awarded to UCL students of economics that is still awarded to this day. Throughout the 20th century, more and more women came to study and work at UCL. The first ever female professor at UCL was Kathleen Lonsdale, who became Professor of Chemistry in 1949, 123 years after the university was opened. 14 years later, Victoria Chick, now Emeritus Professor of Economics, came to UCL. Chick holds a bachelor's and master's degree from University of California, Berkeley, and spent her career at UCL from 1962 onwards. Chick focused on macroeconomics and is best known for her critical and rigorous look at Keynesianism. She published her best known work, Macroeconomics After Keynes, in 1983. Chick is held in high esteem and continues to speak at conferences and universities, answering questions such as why don't economists understand money, and discussing the basics of post-Keynesianism. Economics was at the forefront of women's educational emancipation, but progress since has become slow, especially in comparison with STEM degrees. In the UK in 2018, women made up 51.6% of STEM undergrad students, but only 32.1% of economics undergrads. What is more worrying is that while the proportion of women in STEM has been trending upwards, the opposite is true for economics. 5 years ago, women made up 36.3% of economics students, and this has been decreasing every year since. A gender gap appears for both STEM and economics when it comes to professors, with 21.3% of STEM professors and 14.2% of economics professors being women in 2018. While the gender gap in economics is wide, Plenty of research has led to ambitious initiatives trying to improve the situation. The UK's Government Economics Service began an initiative in 2018 to improve representation of women in economics. And in 2019, the Centre for Economic Policy Research began documenting current female economists and their work. The Women's Committee of the Royal Economics Society works to improve women's status in economics by removing barriers to progress and identifying the causes behind underrepresentation. Lastly, the new Core Econ project being taught at UCL and other leading universities redesigns how economics is taught at undergraduate level, focusing more on real-world problems and hopes to draw women back into economics. The strides made at UCL in the 1800s sent waves throughout the UK, with many universities following closely behind. London has an exceptional legacy of talented and disruptive women in economics, and with plenty of progress still to be made, it is radical initiatives like those at the Royal Economic Society and at UCL that might be what continues this legacy and finally propels women into their deserved equal standing in economics. If you want to hear some theories about why women are so underrepresented in economics and also get to know some female economists that are working today, I have loads of recommendations for you. There's podcasts and articles and video series that were all really helpful in researching this video, including an exceptional TED Talk given by Soumaya Keynes, the Trade and Globalization editor at The Economist, co-host of the podcast Trade Talks, and relation of John Maynard Keynes.